Now, I wish I wore a better shirt today, though. Your shirt's awesome.
You know,
I like this
I
jacket.
thank you. I got this in, gosh, I don't know. I'm gonna say 2015, and I had just. It was funny because you asked, kind of when we hopped on here, how I was doing, and I was gonna really give you an honest answer and
I want the honest answer.
candid, yeah, because that's just who I am. Even though it's funny because I feel super insecure sometimes when I'm like too honest, or because I don't even know how not to be too honest, and then I think back to myself, I'm like, boy, did I say too much, or was was I like too honest, and we're supposed to be like professionals and stuff like that. But the funny story here, or the true story, is I got this shirt, I think it was about 2015, and I remember getting some like high top Adidas that matched the color, and in Italy.
Full
And
tracksuit? Full
yeah,
tracksuit or just the
exactly.
jacket?
The full tracksuit, actually. I had a bunch of this, and I was traveling. I had just gone through this M&A for a company called Mopub. And so
Yeah.
we had sold it to Twitter, and I was like riding this high and all this stuff. And I remember I was just like, I'm gonna dress however I want. I want to kind of just like be, super creative and expressive. And so this is one of the items that I have kept since that time.
I
My
love it.
Adidas have fallen apart. Thank you, I appreciate it. In fact, it was interesting because I think we had first connected. You were at WeWork, and
Hmm.
I had been working on a project called Dash Tab, if you remember that. And
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Because we
yeah, so
connected in 2015, probably.
that's right. Yeah. And
Yep.
and so I was working on Dash Tab kind of underneath the radar. It was my second attempt at starting a sales tech thing. And I was doing it on, sort of on the side while I was still at Twitter. And then I had left Twitter to actually just kind of, you earned out for about a year and a half, and then was just like, you know what, I want to just go out and travel for amount of time. It wasn't enough money for me to like retire or anything like that. So I was like, I'm just going to burn it to the ground. I can probably get a couple years out of this thing. And um and so that's what I did. And the reason why I bring this up is because of kind of why I reached out. And I was like, I saw a post on mental health and entrepreneurship and startups and stuff like that. And I know I really wanted to dig into that for this episode. But the reason why I'm mentioning this story and kind of like tying it in was because I had left again to do Tash Tab. It didn't quite work out from a founder perspective. My founders wanted to do a PLG motion. They were sort of very technical individuals who I love, and I still talk to them. We're like still very good friends, but they wanted to do a different thing. They wanted to do a MailChimp thing. And that at the time, what we were doing, if you remember, Dash Tab had to be high touch. It had to be something that
Yep.
was a higher price point, just given the fact that you can't Salesforce workflows are all super custom, and you couldn't just have a point and click kind of thing for that. Maybe it's still like that to an extent. I know Salesforce has done a lot of different things, and AI does, brings some new possibilities. But I remember sitting there going, no way, I just left Twitter. We're not gonna I left a ton of money on the table and experience, possible learnings, etc. So I was just like, you know what? I remember after walking out of this meeting with my co-founders, I was really like, when we were like, look, we're just not going to do this, anymore. And I had been around the block enough times to sort of see the signs of like, if you're not aligned, you can't really build a
It's not going
business,
to
right?
work. Yeah.
Yeah. So I remember just sitting there going, what am I gonna do? And so I bought a one-way ticket to Madrid, and I just traveled, and I spent a couple years just sort of like traveling around the world, doing a bunch of stuff, focusing on myself and thinking a lot about like what made me happy. And what's interesting is that's been about 8 years since that time now, and there's been so much evolution. And one thing that I wanted to kind of dig into is, again, you had mentioned on Twitter, sort of just talking a lot about like, mental health as a founder. what is it about this experience that is so, number one, I think attracts people who are looking for something more, or maybe, you know, just has that quality of thoughtfulness, I think, and depth and drive. Because, to do something consistently over time, bringing something from zero to something, like, takes a certain level of like, F the world, I'm just gonna like, do something, great. And it's gotta, and it's, you got to dig in a little deeper. So I guess that's my first
Yeah.
question. Why do you think that entrepreneurship attracts this type of individual? And frankly, and I'll add that I think that a lot of founders that I talk to have like dealt with depression, dealt with anxiety, have it currently, those sort of things.
Yeah. No, it's a great, it's a great topic, one that I care deeply about. I was thinking about when we were getting on this call on this podcast too. I was going to use the word like you need to be a little crazy to be a founder, and my therapist would hate me saying the word crazy. So I went and I looked up, synonyms to crazy, right? Maybe very enthusiastic, passionate. There's some negative terms, lunatic, deranged, whatever. But you got to be a little crazy, right? You got to be a little out there. To your point, and it's not just being like a tech founder, right? I mean, it's being going off and working on your own on something, right? Putting your fate entirely in your hands, foregoing a paycheck, right? I I think there's a couple thoughts that I have in it, and I'll go backwards a little bit because we met when I was at WeWork, and
Mhm.
WeWork was hindsight's 2020, right? But like the epitome of like kind of crazy, right? It was we grew at all costs. We did some pretty insane things that people have written stories about and made movies about, but it was a wild time. But the negative tone of, hey, you got to be a little crazy to be a founder, is also kind of the most positive reason to doing it, right? You got to be a little out there, you got to be a little different if you're going to win, if you're going to create something. And so I think that my own personal journey to this was, I am an open book. You said this at the beginning of our call. You sometimes overshare. I am an always oversharer. Every time I get on a call with somebody and they're like, "How are you doing?" I'm like, "Oh, here we go. Like, let me tell you, my daughter was born 5 weeks early, and I've been doing this, and this is what time I went to bed last night." So I'm an oversharer. But the thing that I didn't realize when I was at WeWork is that it wasn't just sharing that mattered. It was like sharing and growing from that sharing, right? It was sharing and then listening and then this rinse and repeat model. And for me, it wasn't until I went through a divorce, quite frankly, that I ever went and I saw a professional. And I saw somebody who was a fine therapist, not the person I'm seeing now, but she was a fine therapist. But I think the thing that I was fascinated by was that the questions that she would ask me about my feelings would not necessarily put me on the defensive, right? That was
Mhm.
certainly true, which was helpful. But they were also just like windows into like thoughts that I had had for years that I maybe never really quite understood. And so, I'll give you an example, just like make it more real for myself. I had this feeling like, man, I was a bad employee at this point, right? When I left WeWork, we were at our height. It was middle of 2016. My son had just been born, and I
Mhm.
left WeWork, and I thought to myself, at the time I left, like I was a bad employee, and
Mhm.
for all intents and purposes, I was a bad employee at that moment in time. I didn't want to be an employee, right? I
Mhm.
wanted to be on my own. I wanted to build something on my own. But when my therapist said to me, like, why would you say you're a bad employee? And I said, well, here's all the reasons that I don't want to listen to direction. I don't hold myself to, accountable on delivery dates that other people said. I hold myself accountable to my own delivery dates. And she's like, but why is that bad?
Mhm.
Like, it's bad in the construct of like, you have developed what a good employee looks like, but it's not objectively bad. It's subjectively bad. And I think that seeing a professional as a mental health professional, that is, as an entrepreneur, is maybe one of the most important things that I had ever done for myself. It's certainly one of the most important things I've done for my relationships. And it continues to be something that I really urge the founders that I back, now 7.5 years into being a venture capitalist, 9+ years into being an investor. I've backed 50 plus companies, and I have said at one moment or another to every single founder I've backed, like, you should see someone, talk to somebody, talk to a professional. it's just different than talking to your friends. It's different than talking to your co-founders. The tools that you get out of it are vastly different than the conversations you get out of a boardroom or a pitch. And so, yeah, man, I'm an open book about this because I just didn't know any better. It's not that I was afraid of mental health. I didn't know any better. No one in my
Mhm.
family had ever said to me, boy, you should see a therapist. And I think if
Yeah.
they would have, I would have gotten defensive.
Do you think that that is something that is built into the American business culture and kind of the, ABC, Wolf on Wall Street, we got to be tough, we got to be this and that. I mean, I don't know if you're a sports fan, but I love basketball, right? And I just saw a post from Drew Holiday's wife. Drew Holiday was a
Yeah.
point guard, that was traded from Milwaukee to Boston, and she just actually posted this thing on, I guess it was on Instagram, how hurt she was that the Milwaukee Bucks literally, like, her husband just went to like, took a nap, woke up, and he was gone, and it was like, hey, this is business, there's,
Yeah.
sorry, and we see this all the time, right, in tech. I mean, god, this last 2 years, how many times have we seen layoffs where it's just like, you're done, you try to get on Slack, it's over, you get an email, and it's over. And I understand, like, as an operator, I totally get, like, these are very difficult decisions, but is that our best? Like, could we do better?
Yeah. I mean, certainly we could do better, right? So I'm not, I think about this a lot. Many of the companies I've backed have had to do rifts and lay people off, right? So certainly we could do better. And I think one of the things is just about being human, right? Putting yourself in the other person's shoes, right? Just knowing we've almost all been there, right? We've almost all been at a point where somebody has said to us, this isn't working out, right? And whether they were letting us go or it could have been in college, you were in a class and your professor's like, you're not really cutting it here, right? Whatever it is, we've all had that conversation. Um, I think we could certainly do better. I I would like to believe that the sort of startup culture is different than like the Wolf of Wall Street style culture, the sort of like win at all costs, sharp elbows, cutthroat, fuck everybody else, kind of mentality. I I would say mostly that is true in my opinion. I think it is different. But I think part of the problem is that we don't necessarily have the tools as founders, as operators, to know what is better. Like I never took a course in college about laying people off. Man, I wish I took a course in college about laying people off, right? Like I never took a course in college about how to quit something. Like you and your co-founders like separated, right? Like how to quit something, how to leave something gracefully and make people look
Mm,
good about it, or at least not bad. I think we're missing the tools. I'm not sure that it's like part of our ethos. I just don't think it's part of our current education. And so right now, if you want to be a founder that handles it well, or you want to be an operator who handles layoffs well, you have to be super proactive about it. And that means talking to somebody. And this just goes back to this point. Like, I don't think that anybody's getting, you know, I don't know, for lack of this, crapped on, if you will. I don't think anybody's being like put down for seeking help. I've never heard it. At least I've literally in all the board meetings I've had, I've never heard another investor or board member be like, "I can't believe you're going to go talk to somebody about that. I can't believe you see a therapist. I can't believe." That's never been the case. I would say that it's not necessarily proactive though. Like it's not something where you say, "I'm going to lay people off," and the first thing is, "Cool, tell us your plan." The first thing probably should be like, have you talked to a professional about this? Like, have you talked to somebody who's done this before? Like, know some of these pitfalls. And so I'd like to think it's changing. The last couple of years have certainly brought on and shed new light, right? Layoff trackers tell you all the tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of people have been laid off. So it certainly had a light shined on it. But yeah, I mean, I'd like to believe that we can all be both supportive, but also run real businesses. To your point, like we are operators, we have to make hard decisions. Like
yeah,
not laying people off is just as bad.
yeah. I remember there was a movie with George Clooney. I'm blanking out on the
Was it
name.
up in the air?
Up in the Air, exactly. Do you remember that? And I
Yep.
remember, he was the one who would go in, and if you're, for everyone who hasn't seen it, check it out. It's kind of a very interesting movie, and he was this consultant that would be brought in to lay people off, right?
Yeah.
And And I remember, watching that and thinking, and there were a couple kind of sad, you know, uh, areas of the movie that highlighted, how it impacted people. And I think it's interesting because I saw posts from a very, very prominent investor in our industry, and I won't mention it, and I because I was very disappointed with the post because it said something like this, and I didn't uh not understand what this individual was saying, but I thought it was the way that he was saying it and the message that he was pushing I didn't agree with. Like, and this is what he said. He said something like, the best leaders and executives will prioritize their P&L to be able to like run the business, and basically like it was in response to all these layoffs going.
Yeah.
And like, yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. Like, obviously, like, you gotta run an efficient organization. If you're burning cash and you run out of business, everybody's out, right? And there's no opportunity. But to our point, there's a way of doing that. I thought that was kind of an irresponsible way of communicating, saying, hey, it's just P&L, everything's P&L. It's like, no, that's not actually true.
Yeah.
As a leader myself, as someone who's worked for great leaders, the great leaders make the tough decisions, but make me feel human at the same time, right? And to
Who
just
who
look,
was your favorite boss? I'm gonna put you on the spot for a second. Is somebody, you don't have to name them. I'm curious. The person that was your favorite, were they the nicest? Were they like what was your favorite if you think back on your career?
actually, I just spoke to him 2 weeks ago, and it's been almost 20 years since I first was worked for him. I'll say his name. His name is Brian Ross. He was my leader, sales leader, recruiter when I was in graduate school doing door to door sales. And I remember the moment that I met Brian. I walked into one of those informational sessions on campus. It was like make
Oh
20
yeah.
grand in the summer, right? Kind of things. And it was, yeah, very
Sounds like a
much,
scam.
yeah, it sounded like a scam. It's one of those network marketing sort of models. But I remember his presence, the way that he made everyone feel. He literally had a room, and I'm not bullshitting at all. Like, he had a room of maybe 20 kids. And I remember he would ask you when he would introduce himself. He was like a Zig Ziglar kind of guy, right? He'd introduce himself.
Hmm.
Hi, Brian Ross. He had this Southern, he's from Georgia, you know. Uh, and he would introduce himself. You'd say, "Hey, yeah, hi, I'm George," whatever. And I remember throughout his speech, his recruiting spiel, he would name everyone's name. Like, he remembered everyone's name in the room, and there were
Yeah.
just things like that that he made you feel. He made you feel human. He didn't sugarcoat that this thing was hard too. Basically, we're doing door to door sales in the summertime for commission only,
Yeah.
and he used this kind of approach of like motivating people, saying, hey, it's really hard, this might not be for you. If this is too hard for you, you should probably, like, this walk out now, kind of thing. And he just empowered you. And every time there were difficult times, um and he was completely, his compensation came directly from us
Was
actually selling stuff, right? So, it's very easy to get emotional about that, but he was never emotional. He always like was super sort of like, again, made you feel like he understood you, but he always made you feel like he had your back, even if he was giving you some feedback that wasn't pleasant. There was never like, it never felt that he was having this reactionary ego thing with you. And to this
yeah.
day, 20 years later, I literally called him the other day because I was thinking about him, and we're gonna catch up. So, it's that kind of leader that, again, just didn't make you feel like you were a piece of meat or just a
Yeah.
P&L,
And listen, I agree with you. Like the way that I don't know who they are, but the way that this investor said this, I think is a crude way of saying it. But I agree conceptually that you do. And to your point, in order to run a successful business, to keep people employed, you got to run a great P&L. I think your point is spot on, though, that you have to make sure that people, they don't just feel heard, they are heard, right? There's a difference. there are two things I recommend founders do when I back almost every founder I back. The first one is I urge them to find either an executive coach or leadership coach or a therapist, somebody. The other thing I recommend they do is they take an improv class or two.
Mm,
So much of being a founder is being
mm,
able to like move in your feet, right? Yes, and right, like when you're fundraising, when you're hiring, you name it. It's also useful in the process of dealing with personnel issues, right? You don't want to be the wall, right? You don't want to like you don't want to pretend you're listening. You don't want to put up a facade that like you're personable, but really people can tell. And I think that, for this person, like, yeah, it sounds like your boss had a great personality about them, a great approach to things. And I'm certain that this person meant it, right? They were authentic about it, right? This was not marketing, this wasn't fodder. And I think that this is one of the things that we do as investors, right? We are pattern recognizers. This is how we do everything, right? As an early stage investor, my goal is to find the next founder that looks like the last one that made $1 billion, right?
mm.
Like I want to back that person. Um, but all people are pattern recognizers. This is what we do. I have a 2-month-old newborn at home, and she's
Oh,
already
congrats.
beginning to recognize. Thank you. And she's already beginning to recognize, what a smile means, right? And there's all this research about it. The smile comes from the eyes, right, not the mouth, right? It's
Mm,
the you can and and so humans recognize that. So when you're laying someone off, right, or you're making a hard decision, you're cutting a budget, right? I, I have to pass on 99% of pitches that come my way, right? This is just my business. If I pass and I'm authentic and I say, instead of saying, let me come up with 3 paragraphs of fodder about why I'm going to make you feel better about my passing, people much prefer when I say, I appreciate your time. I'm not going to waste yours. This isn't going to be a fit for me. If you want to know more, just ask. I'm happy to tell you. But I'm not going to like beat around the bush, right? I'm not going to make up reasons. Same thing when you're laying someone off, dude. People know it and they're going to be upset. They're always going to be upset. You just changed their lives, right? It's a breakup.
yeah.
But they know if you're being authentic. You feel bad about it, you handle it in the best way humanly possible. That just is what it is.
Yeah. Another thing that just came up for me as I was thinking about what made Brian so special too. Language, his wording, right? He never said you work for me. He
Mhm.
would always say we work together.
Yep.
We work together, and he would always do that. And I remember taking that, and I was a college kid, right? Who didn't have a lot of like, managerial experience, within a professional setting. And I remember bringing that in always,
To
and
your
I
own work.
to
Yeah.
my own work. And I got to tell you, I mean, I haven't ever received any negative feedback from from folks who have worked on my team technically
Yeah.
for me or whatever, because I never looked at it like that. I literally remember hearing my dad tell me like, the CEO, and my dad's operated his own business and has worked for many CEOs over the years as well. He's like, you need to literally treat the janitor the way that you would treat your
Yeah.
COO, kind of thing, right? And people do business with people they like, and they're really going to reach that extra inch when no one is looking, and your employee
Yeah.
has the opportunity to reach that extra inch, to go that extra mile, to do that thing. They'll do it when they truly believe that you have their back and that they're working with you. And that was just, again, one thing that I wanted to point out that I think Brian instilled in me.
It's, by the way, especially in this new way of working, right? The last 3 to 4 years have thrown us for a loop, right? Everybody's working in their homes or distributed. I happen to be in my office because I enjoy it. But many of our founders, right, they're working distributed teams. That extra inch, like, it's even easier to not do that when you don't see each other face to face. So how much more important is it that somebody grabs a little bit more? They work a little harder, they work a little smarter, and they show up, right? They actually show up. And so I think that's right. You go back to this original question about like mental health.
Hmm.
And I think that one of the things that I would just say is important, and look, this is like, I'm not blowing smoke because I talk to my therapist every week and I have this conversation every week. We can all do better. Like every day that passes, we can do better than the day before. And this is not like some like mantra on my wall. This is just like human, right? We're growing every day. We haven't seen something, and today we see it. Tomorrow we now have it in our mind. It's just try a little harder. And I think one of the things that winds up happening in this distributed world is it becomes really easy to fall back on like old habits, right? The one that is not showing up for others, but also not showing up for yourself, right? You don't have to be in the office. You don't have to commute. You're not around humans in the same way that you were before. Even more of a reason to take care of your mental health. Like, I can't tell you the amount of founders who show up at a board meeting and their number one topic is this quarter, guess what we did? We brought our team together for 3 days. And I'm
Mm.
like, up until about 3 years ago, that was called daily. Like the fact that that is the highlight of the last 3 months should tell you something. Bringing people
Yeah.
together matters. And so we have changed, right? Society
Mm.
has changed, at least in America, right? And there's other places it's a little different.
Well, thank you for bringing that up. By the way, I want to pause real quick. Are you good on time?
Yeah, I can keep going.
Okay, cool. So 5 or 25. Okay. Um, I'm really glad that you brought that up because the last couple years have been difficult for a lot of reasons. Our world went into some weird, bizarre Twilight Zone episode, right? I mean, we're literally seeing aliens, right, coming up on TV. I mean, I'm pretty sure they're real at this point, right? Like, um, but the pandemic and all these things, and that's, I think, one of the things that, because we've had these sort of issues, because we've gone through this move to like remote, certainly in our industry, right? It's, gosh, who's not working from home at this point? Because of that, I think we have to be more thoughtful leaders. Mental health has to absolutely be part of our training,
Yeah,
hands down, right? Like, even me, I think that I've enjoyed working remotely, and just being in tech. It's kind of been something that I've done on and off, hybrid kind of model, I guess, using the terminology we'd use today, for years. But the last couple years specifically were really difficult, and I would consider myself a pretty like mentally tough, person.
yeah,
But I have to throw that concept out the window at this point, like, especially when the market has been in SaaS, for us, the way it's been the last 2 years. I can't tell you how many times I've spoken to people, not just once, not just twice. I'm gonna say, like, almost like, and then this is gonna be a pretty big number, like 98% of the time I talk to people, and they, I sort of, I guess, by default, based on who I am as an individual, I create an environment where we can talk about these types of
yeah,
things, right? So I understand that. So maybe they have a higher propensity to open up, but I can't tell you how many times people have just talked about very, very openly about how their anxiety was high and depression and things like
yeah,
that, over and over, and how it was exacerbated by, you know, um, working remotely and never seeing anybody. Like, you're just by yourself all day. And then the market conditions. And then lastly, getting fired in a way that was
feels inhuman.
feels inhuman. Now I should caveat, right? And I've actually communicated this to a couple, folks that I've worked with in the past. It's like, hey, I totally get it. Listen, I feel the same way. The only difference is that I've had to shut down startups multiple times myself as a founder, and I understand how hard that is. And we tend to not have an idea, like the average employee, let's say,
Yeah,
doesn't have an idea of what the founder. If you think you're going through something, boy, try being one of those founders who has to lay off most of the company or shut it down. Like, in very, very difficult situations. And so I'm not, obviously, by any means, sort of, accepting poor behavior and things like that. Absolutely not. But I think we have to be able to come together and understand, both sides of the table,
yeah,
understand that mental health is absolutely something that's top of mind right now, and is going to continue, and is absolutely exacerbated. So you can imagine, as for the managers out there, the leaders out there, the investors out there, the boards out there, if you can think about people already struggling with this massive shift in lifestyle and the way they work, and then they get an email and their Slack is turned off, and it's like, hey, it's over, and then you don't talk to them anymore. They're
yep,
literally sitting there. I just spoke, and I won't mention his name. He's a very good friend of mine. He's founder of one of the like very popular GTM tech startups, been through like Series B, Series C. So they've raised a bunch of money, just had to go through multiple rifts. He
Yep.
literally, I spoke to him a couple of weeks ago. He was like, we had to do a bunch of rifts. People are actually threatening their lives and us. And, it's real, man, and we have to
Yep.
take into account. So like, being able to have like a program after the fact to make sure that people are taken care of and supported through the journey after the riff happens. I think things like that are really important.
Yeah. I mean, look, there were a couple things I'd say in what I was sort of making mental notes as you were talking. The first one is you mentioned this thing about, you're mentally sort of hardened. You've been through this. Look, this just goes back to my point, though. I think you can always do a little better, right? So you can always and I just think it's one of those things where I don't think that people should view mental health as a crutch. It's sort of, I mean, not unlike physical health. Like people go to the gym to get stronger, not because they are weak, right? Like there's like a mental exercise there, but like I don't know anybody who like wakes up one morning and goes like, man, I can't lift that weight, I should now go to the gym. They're like, no, I can lift a certain amount, I want to be able to lift more, I want to be able to run further, right? And so I think mental health is no different, right? Treat your mind in the same way. So you did it really well last time, do it even better next time, right? That's the point here. The second thing I'll say is you were talking about sort of founders versus employees, and there's this hierarchical thing that I've talked about with employees who are being laid off before, but generally speaking, in decision making in companies, you go from individual contributor to manager to director to executive to founder to maybe board member, right? And on each rung of that, you have more and more people that you are responsible for, right? The IC has their own goals, their own product, their own marketing budget, whatever it is. The manager, that person might have 3 or 4 people, and the director may have 30 or 40 people, and the C-level exec may have 300 or 400 people. And then you get up to the founder, and to your point, they have 3,000 people, right? And I think that it is hard for anybody to put themselves in the shoes of another person who they're not interacting with every day. And so I think it's significantly easier for the manager to grok what the individual contributor is doing than it is for the CEO or founder to grok what the IC is doing at that stage. But I think if you rely on each level of the company to be honest, to show up authentically, so you don't just show up at the top and say, here's an email, turn off everyone's Slack, we're done. This was how Twitter did it, right? And like I'll use them as an example because it's been so public. This is how Twitter did it. It's horrible, right? And you wind up with lawsuits and all this stuff, right? You got to work your way down, right? You got to communicate what you're going through, why you're going through. It shouldn't be a shock to any employee, right? No employee should wake up tomorrow and say, oh my God, I thought we were doing incredibly well, and it turns out I don't have a job. You have done a bad job as a founder, if that's the case. That's just like, I think objectively you've done a bad job. And then, the last thing I'll say in what you were talking about is that if you do all of those things and you do them well, you do them to the best of your ability, that is all anybody can ask for today, right? Like, and no one is going to be happy all the time. You cannot do that. And I think you also have to be good about letting some of the stress and anxiety go, and get help with it, right? I'm not saying it's an easy task, but get help with it, right? Talk to somebody who can help you develop those tools, the taking a breath, the touching each of your senses, the, taking a walk, whatever it is, right? Being grounded. Everybody's got their way of settling down and relaxing, but I think it's just, you do this in your personal relationships too, but in your professional ones, you got to work at it. And I'm not an expert by any means, but I do show up every week and talk to my therapist about a new topic. And that topic often blends between professional and personal, right? It's dealing with conflict with my spouse or my family, as well as dealing with conflict with people I work with, people I'm on the boards of their companies. But like every single week, I'm just trying to get a little better. And so I think that is that to me is the most important takeaway, is like, it doesn't happen overnight. Just like weightlifting, which, to be clear, I'm not a weightlifter, I'm not a sports guy, but I get the concept, right? It's getting a little better every day.
Absolutely. Well, I really appreciate you sharing this. Certainly something that resonates with me. Over the last couple years, I have spent a lot of time doing meditation. I've always done yoga, but like the idea of yoga before was more like physical, right?
Yep.
Now I've moved into more meditative, mindful sort of practices. And to your point, like you said something about like you go to your therapist and you'll talk to them about topics that seem to overlap in our personal life and our
Yeah.
business life. For me, especially when you're working from your house, right? Like I found it very hard to be able to separate those things. And so it takes some
Yeah.
extra practice for me to say, boy, I'm irritated with something in my personal life. Let me be more mindful of
How to
like not,
separate that.
yeah, not bringing that energy into a
Yeah.
Zoom call. Or we're trying to find product market fit right now, right? So you know how that process is. I
Yeah.
mean, it's an everyday grind. Luckily I've been at it for a long time. It's not my first rodeo, so I can identify beforehand that I'm going to be in moments of high stress or uncertainty. So
Yeah.
so it's like being able to identify that, but sometimes I can't, right? And sometimes I catch myself bringing that poor mood into my personal life. So, that level of mindfulness, I think, is something that employees and leaders and founders have to really start to develop, to your point. So seeing a therapist, maybe some baby steps
Yeah, download
include.
Headspace,
Yeah,
download
exactly.
Calm. Like it's just one step at a time. And look, I'll say one thing. I got sober about a year and a half ago, and I feel great about. But I got sober for myself, right? It was just something I
Mhm.
decided to do. But it was so interesting because I didn't go into a program, but my brother has been forever. So I've learned about that over the last 4 years from him. But everything about this is very similar, which is just like one step at a time. So it's open up the app today, do a 5 minute meditation, put your feet on the floor, breathe for 10 seconds, thoughtfully, talk to somebody, take a walk, whatever, but just like do it today. You do it today, you do it tomorrow. And when that moment comes that you got to make that riff, that moment comes, you got to lay someone off, that moment comes, you got to separate from your co founder, you will hopefully have spent a number of days or weeks or years prior building up that muscle, that ability, that mental muscle, which lets you then show up authentically, show up as a real person, show up and treat the person as a real person. And I think all of those things lead to just better outcomes overall. And that person's going to want to come and work with you again, right? They're going to want to help you. They're going to want to, maybe not today. I want to be clear on that. If you lay someone off, they're probably not going to want to help you today, but in the future, they're going to feel good about being treated like a real person.
Yeah, awesome. Jesse, thank you so much for
Oh, thank
taking the
you.
time to chat. I very much appreciate it. I want to respect your schedule. Yeah, I guess if folks want to connect with you on social
Yeah.
media, like what are the best ways to get in touch with you? I mean, I love your Twitter feed. It's amazing.
I've been working on that. I say that I'm like total open communication. So jesse@flybridge.com is my email. On social though, it's at sarcasm, SRCASM. I'm also open inbox on LinkedIn. So any way somebody wants to get to me, happy to connect. And I'll do my best to be responsive. I host open office hours regularly, so they can be booked on our site as well. But yeah, reach out.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And yeah,
Thank
have a
you.
great day.
Awesome. Cheers, man. Thanks.